I can't imagine how you must be feeling. I thought that last headline there, that's the thing, it's the holiest day, and I think people have to just take this into account for just a second. This is, for me as a Muslim, it's Eid, it's Christmas for lots of Christians. This is one of the most important days in the Jewish calendar. And
it is the most important day in the Jewish calendar. It's the annual...
Set it into context for people that don't know.
So for anyone that might be a synagogue-going Jewish person in this country, if they were only going to go to synagogue on 1 or 2 days, this would have been it. You know, this was designed for maximum impact in terms of attendance, because certainly at my synagogue, you know, we had thousands of people attending yesterday. We have a joint venue that, you know, has 2 synagogues that come together, and it's the holiest day, so people don't use their phones. It's also our fast day, so it's 25 hours of not eating any foods to reflect on the year gone past, to really engage in prayer and reflection. It's a very, very serious day.
So at that time, it was 9:30 yesterday morning. What would have been happening in the synagogue at that time? Would they have been in prayer? What would have been going on at that point?
Yeah, so the service will have already commenced at that time, and there'll be people who have, you know, walked to synagogue, will have been in the synagogue, and we've heard about the bravery of the congregants and the rabbi who did everything in their power. That means we've seen the horrific and appalling murder of 2 Jewish people in this country, and some people that are very seriously injured, and we wait to hear about them, but it could have been even worse.
And, you know, when we don't know the motivations behind the attackers' horrific actions yesterday, but when we look at the symbolism of that event for Jewish people, and also the practical sense that the synagogue everywhere would be so full, do you think that was consciously part of the tactic?
Absolutely. I mean, we know as Jewish people across the country that, and across the world, that we have to be vigilant on all days, but particularly we know that we are a target on our most holy days. It's the same for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year that took place last year. We know that attacks have happened across the world. They haven't, until yesterday, seen loss of life in this country, but tragically and horrifically, we've now seen 2 members of the British Jewish community murdered. But absolutely, you know, we have to increase our security. Most people won't know that for every Jewish site in this country, for every Jewish school, every Jewish synagogue, for every Jewish community centre, there is already very high levels of security that take place, and this will only now have to be heightened in the wake of this horrific attack.
We heard people talking yesterday, obviously the horror within the Jewish community, the horror within the community that was there, and one of the things people said is that as they walked away, were being told to get back and walk down the street, people were coming out of their homes, Jewish, non-Jewish, no faith at all, we're conscious, and that's the kind of spirit we want to reflect on this morning, don't we? And to think about. But, as you say, the idea that there is a specific, you know, the Community Security Trust has to put this in place, has to largely volunteer, isn't it, as well as some backing from the government to keep people safe. When you hear the Prime Minister say we must do more, what does that look like, doing more? What needs to happen?
Well, I think we need to look at how we properly tackle and address anti-Jewish hatred at every level within our society. We've seen over the course of the past 2 years the number of recorded incidents go to the highest levels we've ever seen since records began back in the 80s. That should be a concern for us all. We're seeing anti-Jewish hatred permeate in spaces that we've never seen it before, in cultural spaces. Just in the last few weeks, we've seen some very serious cases of things happening within our NHS, in our universities. We have to tackle this at every single level and take it very, very seriously, because the attack on the Jewish community is an attack on Britain, and we should be doing everything possible to contend with it.
Had you seen some improvement? Because you've left the Labour Party over this, right? Anti-Semitic allegations that were within the Labour Party. People at the time called it toxic. You left, you've since rejoined. But over that time, had you seen any improvement, not just in the Labour Party, but in society? Or do you think that it's just that there's been nothing being done at all?
Forgive me for just correcting what you just said, because it wasn't allegations. There was a report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission that found the Labour Party under the previous leadership was guilty of harassing and intimidating its Jewish members. I can say now that the Labour Party under the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer is completely different, and I've just come back from the Labour Party conference where within the conference it's a safe place for all its members, including its Jewish members. That's not the case for all of society, and we only have to reflect and look on the official figures of what's happening in this country, particularly in the wake of the October 7th attacks, to know that people of all ages and backgrounds are being attacked in their workplace, on their way to work. Some of it's verbal, some of it's physical. We're seeing the level of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hatred online reach levels I have never seen before. And people are genuinely scared. And so they should be. And we only have to see events of yesterday to understand where this stuff can lead and how serious it is. And how serious it is.
Clearly, the Prime Minister is taking it seriously, and like he should be. He's got a personal connection to the community as well, his wife being of Jewish heritage. But should we just hear from his statement? This is a statement that he did make yesterday following the attacks in Manchester.
It is a hatred that is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again. And so I promise you that I will do everything in my power to guarantee you the security that you deserve, starting with a more visible police presence protecting your community.
I mean, these are strong words, but as you say, and I think it's crucial what you say, that this is the Prime Minister and the government can only do so much. It is about people as well, isn't it? Everyone watching now, all of us that live and work in society, have to be so mindful of the language that we may hear around us and need to call it out. And I think on all sides of discrimination, that is not being done, I think, hardly enough, really.
It really isn't. There's been recent reviews. I know you're going to be speaking shortly to Lord John Mann, who is the government's advisor on anti-Semitism. They did a really important inquiry on behalf of the Board of Deputies of British Jews recently to really point to where we are seeing this ugly racism rear its very ugly head. And it is presenting in so many different places that we haven't seen it before, and certainly in ways in which should be of concern to us all. And yes, some of it's just words, but words have an impact. You know, you only have to be a victim of racism once to have an impact on your life, and I've heard firsthand from victims to know that's the case. And this stuff leads to very ugly places.
I mean, we are going to come to you, Selma and Ava, at some point, but I hope you understand we just want to stay with Luciana for a moment because of the feelings this morning. Having said that it is with people, and of course it's with us all across the society. Gideon Falter, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, we have featured his words already in the news, but I think it's just worth listening to again that he directly points to politicians from successive governments. Are we able to have a look at that?
I think we've got it.
Well,
Should we come back to it?
Have it? I'll tell you what, I could... OK, so what he says is we have the blood of dead Jews who've done...
No, this is Gideon
This is a different one. This is the Israeli government.
This is the foreign minister.
OK, well, I'll just say what he said. He says we have the blood of dead Jews who die going to synagogue to pray on the holiest day of the year. That blood is on the hands of our politicians from successive governments who've done nothing to arrest this kind of extremism that's been spreading. We've now got it, but I have done it, so we'll move on. But essentially, it feels like, I mean, he's talking about extremism, and on that, you know, when I look at the front page of the Mail this morning, we still don't know the motivations. We still actually don't know the religion of the person that's been named for the attack. They say he was an Islamic terrorist. And I suppose what people might be thinking and fearing is that we've seen the protests against what's happening in Gaza. Everybody has the right to protest them. I think we're all appalled by the loss of life in Gaza. There were protests in Manchester last night. There were demonstrations in London as well, including some arrests. There have been accusations of anti-Semitic language used during those demonstrations, even though not everybody on there is thinking about that. Is there a sort of fear that the politics of the Middle East is spilling onto the streets of Britain and having an effect?
Let me try to address a few of the points that you've just raised and asked. I mean, the first thing to say is we don't yet know all the details, and I'm sure they're going to emerge.
Well, that's, I guess, what worries me about that headline being so stark.
And we'll find out, no doubt, over the course of today or the next few days, the motives and the background of the person involved. At the forefront of my mind today certainly is the victims and their families and those people that are in hospital that are seriously injured. I don't agree that successive governments have done nothing, so I don't accept the comments that you've just said. What I would say is that we knew that this was coming. And certainly, you know, I had conversations with people before the summer to that effect, that we knew something very serious was on its way. We only had to look at the numbers of incidents that were occurring. It was a very strong sentiment. You know, it's been a very strong feeling amongst the British Jewish community. We've also seen, obviously, events in other countries where we have seen loss of life in America and across Europe. And therefore, I think it's incumbent on not just political leaders, but anyone that has a platform, anyone that has a responsibility in this country, to think very hard and long and deep, to think about what they can and should be doing to tackle the scourge of anti-Jewish hatred, which is, you know, it's not just a discussion. We can point to the figures of what's actually happening in this country to know that it's very, very real. And in terms of, you know, what you've just pointed to and, you know, the events that happened in London, you know, there was no mention or any recognition or acknowledgement of the murder of people in this country. This was just worshippers going, you know, wanting to do what any British Jew in this country would want to do, is to practice their religion in this country, who were murdered because they were Jewish and for no other reason. And on that basis, I think people need to take a long, hard look at themselves and their organisations and the actions that they're taking and the placards that they're holding up and what they're posting on social media, and think about what more they can and should be doing to stop themselves and to think about the impact on people here in this country.
Salma, this is a depressing morning for people of all communities, isn't it? Does it feed into a wider picture, even though obviously for the Jewish community the fears have been there, there have been clear reports of the issues and the risk that have been there, but is there a wider fear, do you identify, as well, for all communities?
So, well, firstly, on Luciana's point about the rise in anti-Jewish hatred, you know, from my time in the Home Office, you know, when I started there back in 2017, we started seeing the numbers rising. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why the government started backing the Community Security Trust, CST, with more money in order to secure synagogues and
Which
other...
is horrific. I mean, many people will not know that was even... And, you know, we know from you, Luciana, we know from our reading, but many people wouldn't know that that was necessary to go to worship, to have government-backed security.
But this is the point. This is not just about the Jewish community. It should be a reflection on the way that we all react to this. There's something that we're all talking about, and this goes to your question, that wider point. We've become so tribal that actually we've forgotten the difference between having an opinion about what might be happening anywhere else in the world and how you treat your neighbour. And that's a really big issue that we are going to find difficult to tackle going forward, because that rot has already set in. And look, I don't want to speculate.
No, because we don't know.
Because we don't know the details. But one of the things that we were always worried about, you know, from a security perspective, is not just those terror cell groups that exist, the fact that you have ISIS that was disbanded, what happens to those organisations and those cells as you go through in other countries, but also lone wolf attacks. And the difficulty about that is that you don't need a lot to be able to inflict a lot of damage. And it is that self-radicalisation that does happen because there is disinformation, because there is hate that's just bandied about without any thought of consequence about the fact that language is not nuanced. I mean, I've come on the show, as you know, many times, and you can say anything that's nuanced about an issue, but as soon as it becomes tribal, you're either on one side or the other. So my only plea today is to say to people, think about the outcome that you want, and this is not the outcome that we want with our arguments and our language.
Ava Santina, I mean, we've talked about the Middle East on this show, and it's a big topic of conversation, quite rightly so. But it's a stark development that the issues going on in the Middle East are now, the consequences of that are happening on our own streets. I mean, that is, you know, if this is proven to be there's linked to that, that is a worrying development, isn't it? And in that case, what do governments do and what do our government do to try to combat that?
But we don't know if it is linked to that. I mean, the stark rise in anti-Semitism long precedes, you know, I mean, obviously, since October 7th, the year that followed October 7th, there was a stark rise in anti-Semitism reporting, and is the Community Security Trust who have been reporting these horrific rises in anti-Semitism. But, you know, it has been rising for over a decade now, and I think we need to ask ourselves why we aren't protecting British Jews. And we also need to ask ourselves, you know, I live in a community where there are security guards outside synagogues and outside schools for young Jewish people who live in Britain. Why on earth are they there? It is so normalised to see the security. And I also have to ask the question of, really, what could these security guards do if someone as horrendous as yesterday did show up at the doors of their organisation?
Just on that, actually, and I think it's important that we hear from members of the Jewish community. Let's hear from a few members of the community in Manchester that we heard from yesterday.
Obviously, you hear about things happening all over the world, but when it comes to your doorstep, it's a big setback, it's a shock.
I have a prayer book in my hand because I thought I was going to go to the synagogue, and my husband said, "You're not going to be allowed out," and then we were evacuated from our building.
This happened on the holiest day of the year.
And so close to home, you know, it's just 10 minutes away for it to happen. And I don't know why, because we're good people. We just want to get on with everybody.
I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? I mean, that line there from that lovely lady, it says, we're just good people, we just want to get on with everybody. The fact remains, the people who go to our synagogues, people who go to our mosques, people who go to our churches have absolutely nothing to do with any foreign policy or don't represent anybody on extremism side. They are religious worshippers, and that just feels...
more than members of the Muslim community represent Hamas.
No, well, exactly.
Yeah.
So I just feel that, you know, that somehow the language, the narrative, we need to change. We need to, you know, I think you were right, Summer, that there is a divisive narrative taking place from probably both sides.
Well, it's extremism, isn't it? And extremists do seek to divide communities. I mean, particularly in that area in Heaton Park, it is multicultural. You do have Jewish people living alongside Muslims, living alongside, you know, Christians, and cohesion is ugly to any form of extremists.
We were put up wrongly earlier on, but I think one of the issues is that the state of Israel speaks out, and that sometimes conflates in people's minds the people that you're talking about, we heard from there. So the Foreign Affairs Minister of Israel yesterday, Gideon Sa'ar, said, and I think you've got that there, the truth must be told, blatant and rampant anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli incitement, as well as cause of support for terror, have recently become a widespread phenomenon in the streets of London. Authorities in Britain have failed to take the necessary action to curb this toxic wave of anti-Semitism and effectively allowed it to persist. And, of course, we know that, you know, it was only less than just under a fortnight ago, wasn't it, that the state of Madeley was recognised by the Prime Minister. How does that feed in, and how do we resist, as a country, the things becoming conflated?
Well, can I just come in? Because,
yes.
I mean, if I can just...
Absolutely.
There's so much to say about that. And, you know, we don't and shouldn't hold any minority community in this country responsible for the decisions and actions of any foreign government. And yet, forgive me, but your question kind of indicated that things might be conflated.
No, I'm saying that when you hear that's the concern, isn't it? That people then conflate the ordinary Jewish worshippers with feelings they might have about the Israeli government.
Well, that's
but how do we resist that
today as well? I mean, look at the Telegraph. This is,
but
you
the
know,
point is,
the
Israel blames
Jewish attack,
after synagogue terror rally.
That is incredibly frightening. I don't want to speak on behalf of you, Luciana, but I can, you know, particularly for my British Jewish friends, this is frightening.
Let Luciana come in.
Yeah. The point is that we don't apply that principle to any other minority community in this country. Why on earth are we extending it to the British Jewish community? There are always responses from international governments to events that happen in this country. That doesn't mean, by extension, that we then hold the Jewish community collectively responsible for the decisions and actions of what happens in the Middle East. And frankly, you know, we've seen this happen time and time again. We've seen it happen even more so over the course of the past 2 years. The Jewish community is held to a different standard. We don't see that applied to other minority communities in this country. And it's regrettable that, you know, that newspapers have chosen to reflect on those comments today. Let's reflect on the comments and the thoughts and the feelings of those people in Manchester who have lost members of their community and who have, you know, seen people of their community that are in hospital at this time. Let's actually reflect on what's happening in this country rather than what's happening further afield. And let's not hold the British Jewish community responsible. Let's actually think about what happens here rather than what happens abroad.
I was trying to, Lucia, and I really don't want you to think that I was doing that in any way to put that thing forward. I think it's about the wider debate.
But it's happening. I mean, you're reflecting what is happening.
Yeah.
And has happened extensively. You know, and people only have to look at my social media feed and the responses that I get to know that I'm held personally responsible on a daily basis for what actions and decisions are taken in the Middle East.
And I appreciate
that's
what
not
you're
just
saying,
me.
but, you know, and I think members of the Muslim community, I mean, for daring to have a public role in life, I get accused of being a terrorist or Hamas sympathiser or extremist on almost on a daily basis.
Well, I get comments on my social media when I present.
Yeah, exactly. And the point I want to try and make is, how do you... Is it, Salma, is it education? How do we do that? Because some people are confusing Israeli foreign policy that represents suddenly all Jews, or Hamas represent all Muslims. How do you... I mean, it's a minefield, it really is. But how do governments, how does society get to the nub of that? Is it education in schools? Is it, is it holding media to account? Because there are some media agencies, my God, and some of the media companies this morning, are sort of pointing fingers already at communities and certain sections of our community. So what needs to happen?
Look, in my many years in government, this was an issue that came up perennially, and we talk about things like education. There is a lot of education out there for people who are willing to take it. I think this is ignorance combined with misinformation. And quite often what you have is people who will look at news sources and will look at news feeds, and it will compound the worst aspects of their own beliefs and broadcast them back. So, yes, there is a responsibility of the media to be responsible around the kinds of language and the conflations and the connections that they make with issues. But there is also something that is, in terms of social media, that is so unruly and unwielding that actually even the legislation that's been brought forward to this point hasn't been able to tackle that kind of misinformation that exists on some of the platforms.
But also they're profiting from it. These social media companies, I mean, look at the Southport riots, look at what happened yesterday. The first video I saw when I opened certain social media sites yesterday was a video of this man being shot. I should not see that, and these companies are making profit off of that. And it's a question for the government of why on earth are they allowing these tech companies to get away with it? Yeah. I'd also add on education. For years, prominent activists in educational activists, advisors in education have said that young children do need to be taught about different people's religions, and they are failing to do that.
I think it's, an interesting point you make about the media. I heard an interview yesterday with David Yelland, the former editor of The Sun, who says that, certain sections of the media are profiting from extremism. It's profitable. But look, we're running short...
I have one word with Lucia.
Yes,
I know you were talking to people yesterday in the community. Just share some of those conversations and talk to us about the fear and their feelings, if you can.
I mean, it was already at its worst levels before the events of yesterday. The fear and the concern and the experience of the British Jewish community over the past couple of years has already meant that everyone knows someone, if it hasn't been themselves, that everyone knows someone, either in their family, who themselves has been directly attacked or has themselves been a victim of anti-Jewish hatred. And that means that people are very, very fearful. They're very, very scared. They were already scared in advance of the events yesterday. And I had a conversation with my 8-year-old daughter last night, and her reflection was, can we still go to synagogue?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And hearing stories from people in Manchester themselves who didn't get to go and pray yesterday on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar was quite extraordinary, and people were genuinely very, very fearful and very, very scared.
I mean, I just want to read a tweet from our dear friend and colleague Rob Rinder, who tweeted yesterday. He said, if you believe in Britain, wherever you're from and whatever your faith, you must stand with us. Many Jews cannot imagine a future here, and history tells us what follows and when that happens. That is striking. The fact that Rob, somebody like Rob, would say that Jewish communities don't feel safe here. I mean, where would they go next? I mean, it's not even something we should even consider. And are you fearful? Are you hearing that? Do you think there is a moment where the Jewish community say, well, we can't stay here anymore?
I mean, it's striking that you just said, where would we go next?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what I mean. No, because
but it is a genuine fear of people in this country about whether they have a safe place to live. And I really wish that wasn't the case, but it existed before today, and I know it will be amplified in the wake of these horrific events and people being murdered in this country. And therefore, you know, this was an attack on Britain's Jews. Yes, we're Jewish, but I'm very proud to be British. This is an attack on Britain.
This is an attack on Britain, absolutely right.
But we do have a responsibility to all minority communities in this country. And we have a responsibility, I think, to ensure that everyone has a safe place to live. And that I can share is not the reflection and thoughts and feelings of certain elements. I wouldn't say all, but, you know, significant numbers of Jewish people are thinking that.
Salma and Ava as well, where are we as a country? What would your message both be this morning? Salma, you want to go first?
Well, to be honest, you know, I feel so upset about this entire sentiment because Luciana is a parliamentarian. You know, of course she's British, of course she belongs here. I'm so sorry. I feel very
Salma. I think that's how we all feel. We don't want to be feeling this for any community this morning. And Ava, look, Salma collects herself, but I think actually your emotions say it all, Salma. Ava, what would your message be for us as a nation this morning?
That there shouldn't be any place for extremism in Britain. It really is heartbreaking to look up and down the country and see this. We saw this last year with the Southport riots. We're seeing it again just yesterday. And it's not British, it's anti-British.
But can I say it's not just about extremism, because extremism is the worst exposition of what discrimination can become, and actually even low levels of discrimination and racism have an impact.
Well, I heard someone mention the word...
I would say that is extreme. I would say I cannot ever imagine looking at my British Jewish friends or anyone who lives in this country and thinking or conceiving of something anti-Semitic. And I would actually argue that is extreme.
Yeah, I mean,
in all cases.
First of all, you know, making no excuse for this awful incident yesterday and this horrible man's actions, but I heard a few hours yesterday near extremism. And you know, it's almost... Even sections of the media and politicians know that there's a line they can't cross. But even that near extremism, some of that division, some of that narrative is incredibly dangerous, because what comes next? You start leaning towards some of that extremism hate, which I think politicians and media are doing. What comes next? This is the next step.
But I'm really sorry, Adil, but we've heard people espouse views that are completely unacceptable from the chamber of the House of Commons.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, all elected representatives in this country at every single level have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it already. It's not just those on the fringes.
Look, thank you so much for your contribution, Luciana. We wish you well. I know that you speak from the heart and for all people in terms of the fear that's feeling, and also to both of you as well. It's a terrible morning, and we will continue talking about it this morning, but thank you very much indeed. Look, after 7, we'll be speaking to the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord John Mann, that Luciana was referring to there. We're also speaking to the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, as well, and other members of the community in Manchester and people living there. But thank you very much to all 3 of you.